My 8-year-old daughter was left at the airport by my parents while they boarded first class with my sister's family. She sat alone at gate B27 clutching her stuffed fox while they sipped champagne at 30,000 feet. The only message I got was a single line that burned through my phone. We all voted that she should stay. No explanation, no apology. Just a decision they made without me about my child. I didn't scream. I didn't chase their plane. I didn't even call back. But 7 days later I did something else. Something that made every mask they wore crumble, and their perfect little world started falling apart piece by piece. And it all began with that one message they thought I'd swallow in silence. Before I tell you everything, I'd love to know you're here with me. Just say hi in the comments or tell me where you're watching from. I truly love seeing how far a story can travel. It reminds me I'm not alone in this. Thank you. And now, let me tell you everything. And if you want to follow the rest of my journey, mine and my daughter's, you can subscribe. Stories like ours, they matter more when someone listens. My name is Arlo, and this is what happened to us. 8 days ago, I watched my 8-year-old daughter walk through the security checkpoint at Denver International Airport with my parents and my sister's family. I told myself she was safe, that family wouldn't let anything bad happen to her. 7 days later, I was the one who tore their world apart, not with shouting, but with clarity I should have found years ago. Tonight, June is asleep in her room, her little fox plush tucked under her arm. The apartment is quiet, except for the hum of the fridge and the faint buzz of the ceiling light. My phone lies face up on the table. The screen still shows the text that changed everything. We all voted that she should stay. I didn't know it then, but everything began unraveling the moment I read those words. That morning, the apartment smelled like toast and the vanilla shampoo June always uses. She sat at the kitchen counter, swinging her legs, her backpack already zipped. I made sure everything was inside her headphones, her sketchbook, the pencils she likes to sort by color, and the fox plush she refuses to leave behind. She was buzzing with excitement, talking fast about dolphins and beaches, and how she hoped the hotel pool had those fountains that spray upward. I tried to smile through the knot in my chest. I couldn't take time off. My team at the software firm was wrestling with a brutal deadline. June didn't need to know that, so I kept my voice light. You're going to have the best trip ever. She paused, suddenly serious. Next time you'll come with me. Right, I nodded. Yeah, next time. But the truth was, I didn't know when next time would ever be. Maybe that was the first crack in everything, me pretending everything was fine when it wasn't. The airport was its usual chaos, rolling suitcases, thumping on tile, coffee brewing somewhere close, kids' crying voices echoing under high ceilings. I spotted my parents easily. Lorraine wore a bright floral scarf like she wanted the whole terminal to see her, and Malcolm stood beside her like a shadow. Sarah and her husband Beck were arguing about whether their carry-ons were technically the right size. Lorraine gave June the sort of hug you give a coworker you barely know, then immediately launched into how first class was the only civilized way to travel. Sarah complained about ticket prices for the 14th time, even though she hadn't paid a dime. I knew because I had flights, hotel, even the matching t-shirts Sarah insisted on so the family looks coordinated in the photos. No one asked June if she was nervous. No one asked if she was excited. They asked which bag had the sunscreen and whether the resort had cabanas with drink service. Then Sarah made a joke, half teasing, half sharp. If June acts up, it's on you, Arlo. You raised her. Everyone laughed. I forced a smile and swallowed everything I wanted to say. At the security line, June wrapped her arms around me so tight I felt her heartbeat against mine. She pulled a folded drawing from her backpack, a half-finished picture of a fox wearing a tiny backpack. Hold this for me, okay? Of course, I said, even though something about the moment felt wrong. Out of place. Like the air shifted. I stood behind the glass barrier watching her walk through the checkpoint, her small hand in Lorraine's. She turned back, waved the fox plush peeking from her bag like it was watching me too. I told myself she was fine. I told myself they wouldn't hurt her. I told myself lies I'd been trained to believe since childhood. At work, everything felt strangely distant. The sprint board, the diagrams, the product manager droning through numbers. I showed Maya the picture my mom texted of June at the gate, one missing tooth, thumbs up the whole thing. Maya's smile faltered a little as she handed the phone back. You trust them? I shrugged it off. It's just a trip. Arlo, she started, but I cut her off with a joke. That was my way, deflect first, feel later. In the middle of the meeting, my phone buzzed. A single text from my mother. We all voted that she should stay. No photo, no context, no emoji, just that. I exhaled through my nose, assuming it was another one of their family humor moments, the kind that always made me uneasy. I flipped my phone face down and forced myself back into the conversation, but a small cold seed lodged itself under my ribs. Hours later, the office lights turned honey-colored and people trickled out with goodbyes. I stayed behind, pretending to polish off code, rereading that text over and over. The longer I stared at it, the less it looked like a joke. Down in the garage, sitting in the cold stillness of my car, I finally dialed my parents. I wanted to hear June's voice, just a minute, a quick goodnight. But the background wasn't quiet. Luggage wheels scraping pavement, kids squealing, Beck shouting about the rental car line. I didn't hear June anywhere. When I asked to talk to her, Lorraine's voice floated through, careless and airy. Oh, she's not here, sweetheart. Didn't you see our message? What do you mean she's not there? Malcolm's voice came next, flat as always. She made a fuss. We all agreed it was better she stay behind. We found an emergency childcare service. My throat dried. She's alone with a stranger, she's fine. Sarah chimed in from somewhere behind them, sounding annoyed I'd interrupted her vacation energy. Relax. It's a good agency. 5 stars. Then the call cut. Just like that. I sat frozen, the steering wheel cold under my fingers, until another text pinged a street address in a neighborhood I didn't recognize. No explanation, no apology. I drove fast, faster than I should have, past warehouses and empty lots beneath stretches of elevated highway where streetlights flickered. The air smelled like diesel and wet concrete. My hands were shaking as I pulled up to a rundown house with a porch light buzzing like it could give out at any second. When the door opened, I saw my daughter huddled on a stained couch, Fox plush pressed to her chest, her eyes swollen and glossy. She ran to me, tripping a little, and I caught her before she could fall. Her voice was a whisper against my shirt. Did Grandma not want me on the plane because I was bad? The question sliced me open. And in that moment, standing in a stranger's dim living room with my daughter trembling in my arms, I finally understood something I'd spent my whole life refusing to see. If this is how they treat the child they claim to love, how had they treated me all those years, and how much of it had I mistaken for love? Back home that night, after June fell asleep from exhaustion, I sat beside her bed, listening to the slow rise and fall of her breathing. The ceiling fan hummed a steady rhythm, almost enough to drown out the thoughts spinning in my head. My phone glowed beside me, that same text still open. We all voted that she should stay. Nothing about what happened was sudden. It was the peak of a slope that started long before I ever became a father. I found myself drifting back to Pueblo, to the old house with the uneven floors and the peach-colored siding. I was 8, maybe 9, sitting at the kitchen table doing homework. Sarah was younger, coloring on the wall with a handful of crayons. When Lorraine walked in, she ignored the math worksheet in front of me and gasped over the scribbles Sarah had left behind. Look at her imagination, she said, smiling like Sarah had painted a mural instead of vandalizing drywall. Then she turned to me. Why didn't you stop her? You're the older one. I remember sitting there stunned, trying to understand why I was being punished for not preventing a crime I didn't commit. That was the first unspoken rule I learned. Peace in the family came at the cost of my silence. Years later, when I went off to college, nothing changed except the scenery. I survived on scholarships and late-night shifts at a diner. My phone would buzz with messages from Sarah about how she was finding herself academically, then socially, then spiritually, whichever version justified needing money. Please, Arlo. You're the only one I can count on. Every time Lorraine backed her up. She's sensitive. You're strong. She needs you. And every time I told myself I was being a good brother. After graduation, when I bought the Aurora house as a practical investment, Sarah called crying. We got kicked out. Just for a few months, I promise. I signed a simple lease, lowered the rent to something I knew they could pay, tried to set boundaries. They never paid the full amount. Not once. The excuses were endless: dental bills, job loss, stress. And each time I pushed back, Lorraine twisted the knife. You make more money. Family takes care of each other. Except I was the only one taking care of anyone. One Thanksgiving at Lorraine's house, I overheard Sarah telling relatives proudly, Arlo lets us live in his property for free. He's always been generous. Everyone nodded like I was a saint. But the truth was, I wasn't generous. I was trapped in the role they'd carved for me since childhood, the responsible one, the one who absorbs the cost. Somewhere along the line, I also started noticing the small ways June was treated differently. At a cousin's birthday, she spilled a cup of juice, and Lorraine reacted like it was a catastrophe. 2 minutes later, Sarah's son knocked over a ceramic bowl, and everyone laughed about kids being kids. Lorraine bought expensive science kits for Sarah's children and gave June dollar store notebooks saying little girls don't need fancy things. I convinced myself I was imagining it. Until the airport proved I wasn't. Even Maya had tried to warn me. One evening after work, as we sat with coffee outside a cafe downtown, I mentioned helping Sarah with rent again. Maya looked at me not unkindly and asked, Are you helping your family, or are you their safety net because it's easier than saying no? I laughed it off. I didn't want to see the truth then. But now I couldn't unsee it. After tucking June in, I went to the bathroom. The mirror reflected a man I barely recognized. Tired eyes, shoulders always slightly tense, a face carrying decades of swallowed words. I realized I'd taught myself to exist around my family's expectations the way vines grow around a fence, tightly, obediently, and without room to breathe. Then I walked past June's room again. Her fox plush lay beside her, one little arm sticking out from the blanket as if reaching for something. And it hit me with the force of a car crash. If I stayed silent, now I'd be teaching her the same lesson I learned, that her comfort didn't matter. Her voice didn't matter, that adults could do whatever they wanted as long as they called it family. I couldn't let that be her inheritance. I didn't know exactly what I would do next. But for the first time in a long time, I knew I wasn't going to keep playing the same role. Not for them. And definitely not at the expense of my daughter. I woke up after a night that barely counted as sleep, my head thick, my chest tight. The apartment felt heavier than usual, stuffed with all the things I'd been avoiding. The light through the blinds caught on a pile of unopened mail statements, notices, restaurant receipts from weeks I couldn't remember paying for, all stacked like silent accusations. The coffee maker sputtered behind me. I stood at the counter, palms pressed to the cool surface, and felt an unsettling truth settle in. Almost everything in my life revolved around managing other people's needs. My parents' expectations, Sarah's emergencies, Beck's endless string of short-term setbacks. Even my own schedule bent around them. The only person whose needs I didn't account for was myself. And last night had proven something worse. I hadn't protected June from the same people who had chipped away at me for years. My phone lay on the kitchen island. I tapped it awake. The message stared back at me. We all voted that she should stay. Earlier, I'd read it as a bizarre family joke. Now in daylight, it had the weight of a verdict. A vote. A decision about my daughter's fate and mine, made entirely without me. I saw the pattern clearly in our family. I had never been someone whose voice mattered. And it wasn't just about June. They'd been voting on my life long before I realized decisions were being made. When I declared my college major, Lorraine told me I should choose something stable enough to support your sister if she crashes. When I bought the house in Aurora, Malcolm smirked. At least Serafina has a place to fall back on. When June was born, they had a conversation without me about whether they should help raise her for a few years, so I wouldn't mess it up as a single dad. It hit me all at once. They'd always acted like my life was a group project and I was the only one expected to do the work. I opened my email to pay a few bills. That's when I saw the new credit card notifications charges from a Florida resort room service, cocktails, a spa add-on. All of it billed to me. At the exact same moment, my daughter was sitting alone in a stranger's house, clutching a stuffed fox she thought would keep her safe. My anger didn't flare hot. It cooled, sharpened. Something inside me solidified into a line I hadn't known I possessed. I sat at the dining table, opened my laptop, and began tracking everything: bank statements, transfers, contract photos, screenshots of texts from Sarah that began with "I hate to ask, but," and ended with me paying for something I didn't owe. I opened Excel and started typing numbers into tidy columns. Rent I discounted for 3 years, payments I covered, holiday dinners I funded, emergencies that weren't emergencies. And then the Florida trip, the trip where they left June behind but still used my card to celebrate their vacation. When the total appeared at the bottom of the sheet, I froze. The number wasn't just high, it was humiliating. Not because of the money, but because it represented years of believing this was normal, believing that love required endurance, believing that silence was the cost of belonging. A thought surfaced. If a stranger had done this to me and my daughter, I would have filed a report without hesitation. So why did I give my family a level of forgiveness I wouldn't give anyone else? I scrolled through my contacts until I found a name I only vaguely remembered: Callum Price. I'd met him once at a barbecue with my old co-worker Jason. Jason had introduced him as a lawyer who can turn a handshake into a contract and a contract into a judgment. My finger hovered over the call button. I hesitated only a second before pressing it. "Callum Price," he answered, clipped and neutral. I need help," I said. "I need someone to make 5 years of family debt into something they can't keep pretending is free." There was a pause. "Come by my office this afternoon. Bring everything." After we hung up, I walked to June's room. She sat on the floor, coloring a fox wearing a tiny backpack. She'd added a little trail beneath its feet, a path leading somewhere unknown. "Where's it going?" I asked. She didn't look up. Someplace people don't leave it behind. Her voice was small, steady. My decision snapped into place. I didn't need to shout. I didn't need to fight. I just needed to choose us. The chapter of being the responsible son was closing. What came next was something I never learned growing up: how to protect myself and the person who depended on me most. Callum's office was a clean glass and steel kind of place, the kind where the air feels colder because the walls reflect everything back at you. I sat across from him with a folder thick enough to be a memoir of all my compromises. He flipped through documents without expression: lease agreements, bank transfers, screenshots of Sarah's texts, the Florida itinerary. The childcare invoice from the night June was left behind. He didn't ask about feelings. He asked about dates, totals, signatures. When I finished explaining, he tapped the folder shut with a single finger. "You don't have a family problem," he said. "You have a financial pattern disguised as loyalty." He slid a blank legal template toward me. "We'll start with a demand letter. You'll give me the numbers. I'll make sure they can't ignore them." At home that night, after June fell asleep on the couch, I opened my laptop. The cursor blinked on a blank email draft titled, "Outstanding Balances, Vance, Rowan." I typed each line carefully. Reduced rent for 36 months, emergency funds, vacation expenses, childcare fees. Then I attached the proof. Every receipt, every transfer, every screenshot. I added the credit card charge I discovered that morning: Sarah's accidental payment on her personal card using mine. When the letter was complete, I hovered over send. This wasn't a simple email. It was a line in the sand. It meant accepting that the version of family I'd been clinging to might not exist. I thought about June curled up in her blanket, about her question in that stranger's living room. Was I bad? Is that why Grandma left me? If I didn't set a boundary now, then I would be teaching her that what happened to her was acceptable. I clicked send. The sound was louder than it should have been, final, almost violent in its honesty. I copied everyone: my parents, Sarah, Beck, and Callum. The silence afterward felt like the moment after pulling a fire alarm, when everything is still right before the chaos begins. The chaos arrived the next evening. June and I had just sat down to dinner when my phone buzzed with a video call from my family. I answered. Their faces filled the screen, turquoise pool water behind them, plastic cups with umbrellas, sunlight too bright for the conversation they were about to start. Lorraine didn't bother softening her voice. "What is this nonsense you sent? Are you trying to humiliate your parents?" Sarah erupted into laughter. "A bill. Seriously. Arlo, this is pathetic," Beck added. "Man, you tech guys really think everything is about money." I kept my voice even. "Those numbers represent years of me covering for all of you. I'm done pretending that's normal." Lorraine scoffed. "Family doesn't keep score. Family, I said, doesn't abandon an 8-year-old at an airport and go drink cocktails with her father's credit card." The screen went quiet. Even the wind seemed to stop on their end. Then Lorraine tried again, voice sharp. "Don't use that child against us." I didn't raise my voice. "You used her first." I ended the call before they could twist anything further. Seconds later, my phone exploded with messages. Lorraine claiming she was worried about my mental state. Sarah warning I'd regret being cold-hearted. Malcolm asking to talk like adults. I didn't respond. I forwarded all of it to Callum. His reply was short. "Good. Don't answer anything. Let them talk themselves into a corner." Later that night, June fell asleep against my shoulder while coloring a fox wearing a tiny hat. My phone vibrated non-stop beside us, lighting up the room with messages I refused to read. I set it to silent and turned it face down. For the first time, silence didn't feel like surrender. It felt like control, quiet, unfamiliar, and strangely peaceful. I held June a little tighter. The storm had started and I didn't know where it would end. But I knew one thing for sure: I wasn't the person they'd always counted on me to be. Not anymore. The next morning, my phone was vibrating non-stop before I even opened my eyes. Notifications stacked across the screen like an alarm I couldn't silence. I blinked at the bright icons until one caught my attention, a tag from Sarah. She'd posted a photo of a cocktail held up to the Florida sun, the caption curling underneath it. "Money changes people, but I'm proud to still have a heart." Lorraine commented beneath it. "So proud of my girl for staying graceful through pain." Graceful. Pain. They were lounging at a resort using my money while implying I'd somehow betrayed them. Within minutes, cousins and aunts were messaging me, asking why I was taking my own family to court. Not one of them knew the part that mattered, the part that had nearly crushed June. I opened the extended family group chat. The scroll was a wall of self-righteous outrage. He's always been ungrateful. How could he do this to his mother? Imagine suing your own blood. My name was being dragged through the dirt by people who hadn't even asked what happened. No one mentioned the airport. No one mentioned my daughter. I took screenshots of every message and sent them to Callum. Minutes later at work, Maya stopped by my desk. "You look like hell," she said plainly. What did they do now? Something in me unraveled. I told her everything: how June had been left behind, how they'd blamed her, how the debt had piled up over years, how they were now painting themselves as victims. Maya didn't respond right away. She folded her arms and looked at me like she was assessing a wound. "If this were one of my clients," she said finally, "I'd tell them to push until the other side breaks. But because these people are your family, I'm only going to ask you one question." She leaned in. "Do you want to keep getting cut slowly with a spoon, or take one clean hit and be done bleeding?" I sat there feeling the weight of that. For the first time, someone wasn't telling me to be patient or be forgiving. Someone was asking what I wanted. Before I could answer, my phone rang. It was an unfamiliar number. June's school. It was Ms. Harris, her homeroom teacher. She wanted to talk privately. She said June had been anxious all day, avoiding conversations whenever other kids mentioned grandparents. Then she paused before telling me the part that made my stomach drop. She asked me, Ms. Harris said softly, if adults are allowed to leave kids behind when they're bad. Hearing that from someone else, a teacher, someone who didn't know the context, was different. June had internalized the blame so quickly, so deeply, that she thought abandonment was a punishment she'd earned. That's what my family had done to her. Not just fear, shame. When I hung up, my hands were shaking, but not from anger, from resolve. If I let this slide for the sake of peace, then I'd be teaching her the same lie I grew up with: that family can hurt you because they love you. My phone buzzed again. "Callum, He wanted me in his office. When I arrived, he slid a printed draft across the table. "This is the second letter," he said. It was more formal, more precise, a line-by-line breakdown of unpaid rent, copies of transfers tied to false emergencies, proof of charges placed on my card without consent, documentation of the Florida trip, and at the bottom a citation of the statute relating to child endangerment and abandonment. Callum tapped the page. "If they want to settle this privately, they'll pay. If they keep smearing you publicly, or if they continue refusing, we can escalate. But that path involves child welfare officials. You need to think carefully about whether that's a door you want to open." The implication was clear. The situation had reached territory I never imagined. Not family drama, not arguments, consequences. I stared at the paper. "I want the debt acknowledged," I said quietly. "I want the boundaries set. But I don't want June pulled into interviews or hearings. She's 8. Callum nodded. "Then we draft it this way, strong enough to show we can escalate, soft enough to keep her out unless they force our hand." It felt like walking a tightrope stretched between two cliffs, protecting my child on one side, protecting my sanity on the other. That night we sent the second letter by email and certified mail. The next morning everything went eerily silent. Sarah's post vanished. Lorraine replaced hers with a vague message. "Every family faces storms, but love will win." My phone, once buzzing with accusations, now sat still. Silence used to mean I'd done something wrong. Now it felt like the other side realizing for the first time that they couldn't bully me back into place. 3 days later, the tracking notification arrived. The letter had been signed for by Lorraine. They were back in Colorado now, and I knew the next move wouldn't be through screens. It would come to my door. Saturday morning, June and I were halfway through breakfast when the doorbell rang 3 sharp, insistent chimes, the kind that announced not a visitor but a confrontation. I looked through the peephole. Lorraine, Malcolm, Sarah, Beck, all dressed like they'd rehearsed this. A united front. "Go to your room, June," I said quietly. "Play your music. Close the door." She obeyed, worry in her eyes. I opened the door just an inch, blocking the frame with my body. "Sweetheart," Lorraine said, in a voice coated with sugar. "Can we come inside? The neighbors don't need to see family disagreements." "We'll talk here," I said. Malcolm inhaled deeply. "You're embarrassing us. Let us in." Sarah raised her phone recording. Beck crossed his arms behind her like backup. I understood immediately if they couldn't win privately, they'd try to win the public narrative. "You want to pretend this is your house?" Sarah asked. "Let's show everyone how you treat your family." I ignored her. Lorraine pressed forward. "You're angry about the airport. Fine, but dragging money into this, punishing all of us, that's not love." I met her eyes. Leaving my daughter at the airport wasn't love. Sarah scoffed loudly. "Stop making June an excuse. You're turning her against us. I'm teaching her what safe people look like," I said. "And right now you're not on that list." Their faces tightened. Malcolm stepped in. It was a misunderstanding. A small one. If it had been Sarah's kids left behind, I asked, "Would you call it small?" He didn't answer. Lorraine's voice cracked. "If you don't withdraw those letters, I'll consider you no longer my son." I'd heard variations of that threat all my life when I chose my major. When I moved out. When I couldn't pay Sarah's debts one particular month. When I said I was keeping June even though they wanted to help raise her. This time I felt nothing break inside me. I just said, "Maybe that's the most honest thing you've ever said to me." Sarah lowered her phone, unsure whether to keep recording. I continued. "My lawyer included everything. The lease you signed, the payments you missed, the Florida charges, the childcare invoice, and yes, the report of what you did to June." Lorraine's face drained. "You wouldn't involve authorities. You wouldn't. I'll do whatever I have to do to protect my child. If that means someone else finally sees what you've done, that's on you." They were silent, as if waiting for me to soften. I didn't. "This isn't about money," I said. "This is about the line you crossed, and the fact that you think you can rewrite what happened." For a moment no one moved. Lorraine's breath hitched. "You'll regret this." I stepped back. I regret letting it get this far. Not this. I closed the door slowly but firmly. The latch clicked into place loud in the quiet hall. Inside, June peeked from her room. "They're not coming in." "No," I said gently. "This is our home. Just ours." She nodded and went back to her music. I leaned against the door, listening to their footsteps fade down the hallway, and realized the shape of the conflict had shifted entirely. This wasn't argument anymore. This was consequence. And whatever came next wouldn't be fought in living rooms or group chats. It would be settled in signatures, documents, and truths that could no longer be avoided. After shutting the door on my family, the apartment fell into a heavy quiet. June kept drawing at the table, but every few seconds she peeked toward the hallway, as if expecting another round of pounding on the door. I sat down across from her, the adrenaline wearing off and leaving behind something steadier, colder. The fight wasn't over. It had simply changed shape. That night, Malcolm called. Alone, no Lorraine, no Sarah. He started with a sigh. "I get why you're upset, Arlo, but dragging lawyers into family matters, it never ends well. Maybe we can settle this among ourselves." I asked him one thing. "Do you know what June went through that day?" Silence. He didn't ask. He didn't even try. He only wanted me to ease the pressure so he wouldn't have to choose sides. That told me everything. A day later, I was back in Callum's office as he drafted the next letter. He read it aloud like a verdict, the exact debt, the deadline, the airport incident described in unembellished legal language. No anger. No drama. Just consequences. "This isn't a threat," Callum said. "It's clarity." That evening, Lorraine and Sarah started a group call. Lorraine opened with, "We'll pay part of what you claim. But the Florida stuff, the childcare." "Come on, Arlo. Families don't nickel and dime each other." Sarah played the victim, tears already in her voice. "You're ruining my reputation. At least delete the screenshots. You didn't have to save everything I ever said." I kept my voice calm. "I'm not negotiating feelings. Either we settle this properly with the full amount or the court handles it." Cornered, Sarah snapped. "Fine, I used your card. We didn't pay rent. And yeah, we left your kid at the airport. You survived." Her own mother gasped. "I didn't. I memorized every word." 3 days later, while helping June with math homework, an email arrived: settlement agreement, Vance, Rowan full repayment. A large initial transfer, monthly installments, all signatures included. Callum called to confirm it was legally sound. The decision was now mine: accept the agreement and close the door, or take this into a courtroom and burn the last bridges entirely. I looked at June. She was drawing again, her fox with sunglasses, dragging a tiny suitcase. "Where's it going this time?" I asked. "To some place where nobody wants it to disappear," she said. That was enough. I signed the agreement. Not because I forgave them, but because I was done giving them access to the parts of my life that mattered. The war ended, not with yelling, but with a PDF. 3 months later, the chaos felt like a different lifetime. Every month on the dot, I received the same email: family reimbursement installment received. No pleading, no guilt tripping, no excuses. Just repayment, clean, quiet, overdue. Word came through extended family about how things were unfolding. Sarah now worked full-time at a dental clinic, standing behind a desk all day. Beck was driving delivery routes across the city. Lorraine stopped bragging about me at church. Malcolm slipped back into silence. Some relatives pieced the truth together. I didn't help them. The facts were already out there. Meanwhile, my life started to steady. The Aurora house had new tenants. Real tenants. They paid on time. The income let me cut back on overtime, which gave June and me something we hadn't had in a long time: evenings. We cooked dinner, took walks, drew our silly fox characters, and reclaimed the kind of peace that doesn't feel like the calm before a storm. One night, Malcolm sent an email, short-clipped. "Things went farther than I expected. I didn't know the full situation at the airport. I hope someday you understand." No apology. Just self-preservation dressed up as concern. I let the message sit unanswered. Weeks later, Lorraine texted asking to see June just once privately. She said she wanted to explain. Part of me, the boy who grew up desperate for her approval, hesitated. But then I remembered June's trembling voice in that stranger's apartment. Was I bad? I replied. When she is old enough to choose for herself, she can decide. My job right now is keeping her safe. That door stayed closed. One warm evening, June and I sat on the porch watching airplanes blink across the sky. She held up a new drawing. The fox, again this time, standing in front of a tiny house with two shadows inside. It's home now, she said. It's staying. For the first time in a long while, I believed her. I didn't save my old family, but I saved ours. And now I leave you with the only question that still lingers. If the people who call themselves family left your child alone at an airport and told you it was nothing, would you have stayed quiet? I didn't shout. I didn't beg. I put the truth on paper and let the consequences find their way home. Did I go too far? Or did I finally go exactly far enough?